everybody, welcome along to this lockdown video filmed from my home office. Welcome along. We have had a lot of people ask us for our advice and guidance during this crisis, this very bizarre set of times that we find ourselves in. People wanting to know more about how to manage customer experience during this time, what to expect as the lockdowns start to unlock, and what might be coming down the line. So we've created a long format piece which covers 6 different steps, 6 different things that we think you could do to help you navigate the coming recovery, the coming changes, whatever is coming down the road for all of us. There's a long format piece on our website which we will link to underneath this, but we've also done this piece where I just walk through the 6 steps, talk you through a deck, explain the different things that we're seeing and what we think might happen next. So I hope it's useful. If you have things that you would like to add, things that we can do for you, then please reach out to our team. We're all in this together, so anything we can do to help you, we would love to. But enjoy for now and look forward to your comments. Thanks very much. So, as we manage our businesses and our customers through this crisis to whatever recovery will come down the line, it's a time to really understand how important and seismic this shift has been and will be. And we wanted to explain a bit about how we think things have changed and why they've changed, particularly as relates to customer behaviour, and also as relates to business behaviour, because I think a lot of businesses have still not potentially cottoned on to quite how much things have changed, particularly if they're not in the spaces that have been shut down in terms of what a recovery might look like. And then moving on to talk about the 6 steps that we think you can, ways that we think you can prepare for what comes down the line. The New York Times categorised what's happened as 10 years of change in 1 week when the lockdown started. In a single week, everyone had to learn to survive in a completely new way. So wherever you find yourself, wherever you find your business, your relationship with your customers will inevitably have changed. They may be behaving in completely new ways. You are either probably inundated or incredibly quiet or closed. So selling more than you can handle, worrying about the quality of the customer experience that ensues from that. Maybe you're over-servicing the few customers that you have left. Or as I say, maybe you're completely shuttered because the government in your country has mandated that you close the business for the time being. But in all 3 scenarios, it's important to have a little think about what might happen next. It is completely impossible to know for sure. And I think as business leaders, we're engaged in the act of positioning our companies and teams for the future. But we're very challenged by the fact that there's no possible way to know what that looks like. And that's at the best of times, never mind now. The investor Howard Marks commented recently that this is the paradox that we must deal with, i.e. we have to position the business for the future, but the future is very unclear and uncertain at the moment. So in an attempt to help arm our business and all of our customers and friends' businesses for what might come down the line, we took a bit of a deep dive into some of the articles, some of the research, and also some sort of history around pandemics and around systemic change that we thought might be useful. There is a long article that accompanies this piece on our website, and also a bibliography at the end of that if you want to read some of the books and references in here yourselves. So having assimilated a lot of the information, it seems to me that any recovery that we start to see is probably going to be characterised by waves of false starts. I think many of us have gone through this thinking when it will be over, but actually it feels like if there is to be a second wave, a third wave, ongoing waves, sudden flaring up of the viruses in certain hotspots, certain areas, that things may very well be unlocked in certain places only to be quickly relocked, or that we expect things to rush back and they don't because people are nervous or afraid, or actually people do rush back and there's too many people and they get locked down again. So I think the most important thing to take away from what might happen next is that it's likely the recovery won't be binary, it won't be on or off. Until there's a vaccine in place and widespread testing, I think there will be these waves of false starts and feeling like things will get back to normal. You know, you've even seen that in the stock markets in various countries too, where people rush back and then realise things aren't quite what they thought and retreat again. Ed Yong wrote an article in The Atlantic where he said communities could relax restrictions gradually and see if the virus remains at a simmer or returns to a boil. When the virus returns, political leaders should be able to make a more informed decision about which levers to flip. Now, you know, that all sounds very sensible, and I think a lot of the countries are looking at this sort of gradual relaxation. But the reality for us as humans, business owners, and customers is going to be really unreliable and really unsettling. We will all be faced with new events and new experiences, and we will react differently. I think there'll be fear amongst those who haven't had coronavirus in their households or families. And as the Times has reported, you know, a lot more people are obeying the lockdown, certainly in the UK, than the government ever modelled. So actually getting people to leave their homes might be one of the big challenges. So combining all of the above and looking at the very different ways that I think people may be responding and may be behaving as we go forward. I love this graphic on the right is from a gentleman called Azim Ahar who runs a blog called Exponential View, which is really worth a read. And he talks about how recoveries are normally seen as just sort of two axes, where you've got time at the bottom and economy down the y-axis. He talks about the recovery potentially having three axes to it, so that not only will the economy potentially recover over time, but it will also change fundamentally structurally as well. So not just recovering, but recovering in a very different way and ending up in a very different place in time and space, I guess. And I really like this way of imagining it, because it just goes to show that we might have to change our thinking about where we're going and how we might get there. And I think this is a very important point to consider around, are we actually bridging a gap, which so many people of us have said, or are we actually, in fact, not bridging a gap at all, but scaling a very different mountain range? You know, I'm seeing a lot of articles and commentary online and in the news about bridging the gap until we bounce back. And although I applaud these and I wholeheartedly want us all to bounce back, I'm not sure they're fully switched on to the ramifications of the change that's happening at the moment. Justin Wolfers, who's an economist at the University of Michigan, told The Atlantic that we have to build companies a time machine. You know, he's referring to sort of the grants and the debt relief that the governments are putting in place at the moment. So saying that this time machine would allow companies to shift their expenses to the future. You know, looking at the situation, I feel like the very thing that's needed to control the virus, this slow unlocking, is the thing that will mean bridging a gap, and this sort of time machine concept won't actually work. Because if we're not all back and contributing to society at the same time, we've got to expect that shape and style of business that thrives particularly in the sort of 3, 6, 9 months a year and that's upcoming will probably be quite different, because there just won't be enough customers for those businesses to succeed. You know, I'm thinking of things like you know, coffee shops, for example. You know, if we're not all back in the city centres, will there be enough business to go around for coffee shops? You know, and if there isn't, which is likely that there isn't, will it mean that actually a couple of very niche, amazing coffee shops that can deliver something experiential that you can't get at home will thrive? Or will it mean that there's just one massive homogenous Starbucks that everybody goes to in each town? Now, I don't know the answer to that, but I think it will be really interesting to question how will business emerge and how can we offer as businesses something a bit different to our customers as they come out of this crisis. So what will it mean for customer experience? I think this is the thing that we want to really understand and cover. I think there are 6 ways that you can prepare for what's coming down the line. So the first way to prepare, I think, for you and your teams is to really buckle up. It is going to be a bumpy ride. There won't be that dramatic V-shaped return to normal. And it's time to be as creative as possible. So, you know, how can you exchange the assets of your company, your goods and services, the culture, what you do, for money in this environment, in this new world. I think courage is going to be really important. I think I see a lot of businesses waiting for customers to come back online, to return to mainstream. So I think, and if that happens, then great. And it may well do for some businesses, but for others, it probably won't, or that return will be very staged. So I think courage here is a really important virtue, getting the team together and understanding that things might be different, revenues might be very different, but that actually we can use that time to be scared to life rather than scared to death. So really being creative about the ways that we can do different things, but also really buckling up the staff for what might come next and encouraging them to be creative and encouraging them to think around the outside of what the company's traditional business methods might be. I think the second one is not to expect things to snap back to normal. So we've talked about the unlikeliness of a V-shaped recovery, the concept of a Y-axis in any recovery, that things will be potentially systemically different. Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote the very famous book Black Swan about improbable events and how they impact society. This quote from the book where he says, history and societies do not crawl, they make jumps. They go from fracture to fracture with a few vibrations in between. And yet we and historians like to believe in the predictable small incremental progression. These headlines at the bottom are just a few that I captured today. All about bouncing back, all about going back to normal, all about things slowly returning to how they were, this kind of incremental situation. And yet I do think we've seen a fracture. I do think we've seen a fundamental change. So in any planning that you're doing, and I don't just mean this financially, I mean sort of mentally and in the way that you think about your business, don't expect things to snap back to normal. I have seen this in my own thinking. So despite the fact that I wrote this essay, did all this research, and I'm saying this to you now, we had an event planned where we were going to get some people together at the Gherkin in London to do an event. And all I did in my mind was just move that event out a couple of months and think, well, we'll do it in the summer. The reality is we could deliver that online, and we should be. And now we're going to, because of thinking this way. So really make sure that what you're doing, even if you kind of mentally get it, is that you are actually changing your behaviours on the ground to make sure that if you're doing something or you wanted to do something in your plan, instead of just delaying it, putting it off, cancelling the spend, you're actually thinking, well, how could we deliver that in a different way? Or how can we get the same result by doing something different, but making sure that we do actually do something rather than sitting there in stasis? I think the third thing, and this is probably one of the most critical things, is looking at how your customers are likely to behave now. There's a lot of great stuff on the internet about the Second World War and how that as a crisis drove innovation in so many businesses, and you know, radar and all sorts of other amazing technologies came out of necessity. There will be so many underserved needs out there in the community now that will go forward, you know, particularly amongst people who are at risk or vulnerable. There's a whole emerging set of markets and set of consumers that will need things that they've never needed before in a way that they've never needed before. So think really hard about how the skill set of your company fits rather than what it is you think your company does. So at the bottom, there's some examples here. On the right, this is a home desk setup that's been made by a company that actually normally makes props and sets for stages, so for theatres. And obviously at the moment, all of those are shut. They have no market there. So they've very quickly turned their hand to making these home desks that can be assembled. To the left of that, this is someone who turned their car park into a drive-in movie with vehicle-side food delivery with social distancing in place. Put up the new Spider-Man movie, I think it was, and sold that out instantly. New Balance, making masks, not shoes. Lots of people doing that, but you know, a great way to contribute to society and keep people moving and delivering stuff in the business. And then on the left, this is a company who makes escape rooms, who have started making escape puzzles that they can send through the post and are doing incredibly well. So have a think about your skill set, have a think about what you can offer as a business. And rather than just thinking we produce software or we produce stage sets, think about what tools, what skill sets, what are we good at, where can we innovate, what could we deliver, and what are customers needing right now that we could support the needs of going forward. Number 4 is about giving a more understanding customer experience. So, anyone that's been to a supermarket in the last couple of weeks will know that it's just become a sort of terrifying, soulless, long queuing existence. And I think surely the supermarkets are thinking hard about if this is going to be a long-term thing for them, which it probably is, and all other shops and stores and bars and restaurants as they return. I think the ones that win will be the ones who can consider how to deliver, for example, social distancing that delights. So, there's this sort of depressing zombie tape all over the floors of the supermarkets to stay 2 meters apart. Well, why couldn't that be fun? Why couldn't that be like an adventure map on the floor of the supermarket, or big logos or big pictures or facts, or something that, although it does enforce the social distancing, actually makes it fun and engaging to be in the store. So thinking about that guest mentality, thinking about moving your business to something more experiential, being really ingenious and really flexible around that, I think will be absolutely critical. So, customers are having to interact with many businesses in whole new ways. Obviously, Zoom conferences, what could you do to make those more fun and engaging for people? They're already getting a bit tired. I think that whole piece about understanding where customers are and making delight and excitement, kindness and joy through those experiences, seeking to really deliver great service is going to be very important. Our 5th suggestion around how to prepare for what comes next is to value speed over precision. So it's very, very easy, and I think this in the world of software is also extremely true. We see this ourselves, that it's very easy to think that something has to be perfect before it hits the market. And I think it has to be fit for purpose and it has to be good, but I think it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect to get it out and then iterate on the fly. I've seen that with shops who are shuttered and then gradually opening, and at the vagaries of staff availability and people self-isolating, who've really understood how to get the shop moving, get stuff out there, and accept that sometimes they might have to shut and communicate via social media to do that. So I think the rules have definitely changed. In Black Swan, to combat black swans, Talaire urges us to tinker as much as possible. So if you can tinker with the business, if you can try new things, and if they work, do more of them. If they don't work, mothball them. But move forward in a way that allows you to get things out, iterate, and then keep moving on, rather than retooling your business completely in the background, launching it, and then finding that it doesn't fly because things are changing quickly. One point I would really make is, if it was hard to do business with you in last month's world, pre-lockdown world, you have to multiply that by 10 now. So really look at and map out your customer journey in this new world and see where the sticking points are. See where you can speed things up, see where you can remove barriers. Things like the credit card companies upping the amount that you can do contactless. That's really helped with people doing business with other people. So, see in this sort of new touchless economy that we are heading towards, where you can remove the touch points and make it easier and safer for people to do business with you. Finally, the 6th point, I think, is how can you measure success differently? We're all very used to our standard set of KPIs, our standard profit and loss. Those things are useful, but also in the environment we find ourselves in, hanging on to customers even at a lower level, so that as the recovery unfolds, you can buy them new things in, sell new things to those customers, adapt your products and services to that customer base. The reach that you have into audiences that may buy from you in a whole new way in the future, That's a really important measure of success now. And share of ear and not just share of wallet. So in this digital environment we find ourselves in, where everything is suddenly online, no real catalogues anymore, no mailers, nothing that you can physically send out. What does your share of ear, your share of digital voice look like, and how do you measure that? How do you measure how much you have a community, how much you are giving back and caring and supporting your customer base and your community through this crisis? All of those things are really important for how you measure success in the future. So sit with the management team and come up with a new set of KPIs and a new dashboard to look at some more of these things to help you understand how you're doing in this new market. So, in summary, I think trying as hard as you can to be of service. So, not necessarily selling what you've always sold, doing what you've always done, but looking at the markets, the audiences, and the people that you deal with and thinking, how can I meet unfulfilled needs and how can I be someone and something useful in this market? Really tinker with the business. This is a time to try stuff and try stuff and try stuff and roll with the punches. There will be lots of them. I think if you're still looking for your old business model to come back, you need to have a little bit of a word with yourself and think that might not happen. If it does happen, you already know how to do that, and that's great, but there will be a new normal. So roll with those punches and look at what's coming next for you and adapt the business. So thank you for your time today. I'd love to know what you think in the comments. If you go to CustomerThermometer.com, you can get a free trial of our application, which will enable you to get feedback from staff or customers in terms of how they're feeling about your business, how they're feeling about your COVID response, how they're feeling about working from home, all sorts of things. And you can also read the essay that accompanies this on our blog. Thank you very much.